is so much fun. Here comes Andy Pandy in Andy Pandy Land.
One morning, Andy Pandy took his football to Tiffo's house. They were having a great game. Then Andy Pandy gave the ball a really hard kick. It went like a rocket and Tiffo followed it. Looby Loo was hard at work in her garden when it arrived. She hadn't been expecting it at all. And she certainly hadn't been expecting a galumphing Tiffo. Looby Loo didn't like people playing games in her flower bed. Tiffo said he was sorry. Andy Pandy said it was his fault. Anyway, it was just lucky that her flower bed had no flowers in it. Ah, but it soon would have. Looby Loo had been planting seeds that would grow into flowers, just so long as the birds didn't eat the seeds first. Andy Pandy told Tiffo that there were no birds around just now, and he knew just the very way to make sure that the birds wouldn't come and eat Looby Loo's seeds when she wasn't looking. Andy Pandy said he'd be back later with a special bird scarer. When he got home, Andy Pandy went to his special cupboard. There he found 2 lengths of wood, some strong glue, a piece of cord, an old pair of gloves, and a rather moth-eaten jacket. Then he got to work. He put glue on one of the pieces of wood. Then, when he'd stuck the other piece to it, he made sure that the join was good and strong by tying the pieces together. Then he went back to Looby Loo's house to finish the job. When Andy Pandy got there, he asked Looby Loo if she had an old pillowcase and something to stuff it with. Looby Loo said she had. She'd been making cushions for her sofa a few days ago and still had quite a lot of the stuffing left. Soon Andy Pandy had stuffed the pillowcase. Andy Pandy still had a bit of cord left over, and he tied the pillowcase onto the wooden cross. It looked like a head. He put the jacket and the gloves on too. Now it was beginning to look like, well, a scarecrow, which is what they had made. Looby Loo said the scarecrow ought to have eyes and a mouth. The buttons would make lovely eyes, and the felt would give their scarecrow a great big smile. Now their scarecrow was finished. Well, almost finished. Looby Loo said that it needed a final touch, an old hat. That ought to keep the birds away from Looby Loo's seeds. Then Looby Loo remembered she'd asked Teddy and Andy Pandy for tea. She'd been so busy making the scarecrow she'd quite forgotten. While Looby Loo was making tea for them all, Andy Pandy said he'd show the scarecrow where it lived. The sun was beginning to set as Andy Pandy put the scarecrow in the flower bed. Teddy was hungry, and he was so looking forward to his tea that he didn't see Andy Pandy or the scarecrow. Looby Loo had made them a delicious tea. Teddy particularly liked the sausages on sticks. He'd eaten 26. Looby Loo thought 26 was quite enough sausages for one day, so he had some cake instead. When they'd finished eating, Teddy noticed it was getting dark. It was getting late, nearly bedtime. "Too late to help with the washing up?" asked Andy Pandy, but Teddy pretended he hadn't heard. When Teddy saw the scarecrow, he didn't know who it was, but he didn't like the look of it at all. In fact, the longer he looked at it, the scareder he got. So scared that he just had to run for help. "Help!" shouted Teddy. He told them there was someone lurking in Looby Loo's flower bed. Andy Pandy and Looby Loo knew what had scared Teddy. Andy Pandy told Teddy not to worry. He'd been scared by the scarecrow. If the scarecrow could scare Teddy, said Looby Loo, then it would certainly keep the birds off her seeds. And as he was back in her house, perhaps now Teddy could help with the washing up?
As he can be, Teddy too, playing in
Looby Loo had brought Andy Pandy a present, some young plants she'd grown from a packet of seeds. Andy wanted to put them in his front garden right away, so he fetched his best trowel and hurried outside to dig holes for the plants to live in. Andy knew just where he wanted the plants to grow, and he started digging the first hole. Teddy had got a present too. On his doorstep he'd found a parcel which had been sent by his uncle, who played music in a teddy bear band. Teddy had never seen a thing like this before. It was long and thin, and had lots of holes in it. But nothing came out of the holes. There was another hole at one end, but Teddy couldn't see anything inside, so he thought he'd try blowing into the long, thin thing. Now Teddy knew what his present was. It was a whistle, just like the one his uncle played in the teddy bear band. Just as he was going to play a tune, Tiffo came to ask if they could play a game together. Teddy was pleased with his tune, but Tiffo didn't like it at all. He thought it was an awful noise. Teddy couldn't wait to play his whistle for his friends, but first he had to tidy up. Tiffo wanted to make sure the awful noise had really stopped. He'd never seen a whistle before, and thought that this must be a long, thin bone Teddy had left out for him. He decided to bury it in a secret place until he was hungry. Andy Pandy had finished the holes for his new plants, and he went indoors to fetch them. Tiffo was delighted to find that someone had already dug some holes. This was the very place to bury his new bone. Then he could go and tell his friends about the long, thin bone he'd buried in a secret place. Andy was ready to put his plants into their new homes. Tiffo had found Looby Loo, and he told her all about the long, thin bone he'd just buried. He was very pleased. But Teddy was very worried. His brand new whistle had vanished. Where could it have gone? It must have rolled away, but where to? Teddy looked everywhere he could think of, but the whistle wasn't anywhere in his garden. Perhaps it had rolled all the way onto the green. Orby and Missy Hissy were enjoying themselves in the sunshine, but Teddy was still looking for his missing whistle. He thought the long, thin whistle might be hidden under Missy Hissy. After all, she was long and thin. Teddy made her slither aside. And when there was nothing to be found under Missy Hissy, Teddy made Orby roll aside. But Teddy still couldn't find his whistle. Andy was sure he'd put all his new plants into their holes, but all the holes were full and one plant was still left on the tray. Andy thought he must have counted them wrongly. Still, he was now very good at putting his plants in the new homes, and he soon dug another hole. Looby had come to see how the new plants looked. She thought they'd grow beautifully, but she noticed that there was a gap in the row of plants. Teddy had searched all over the green, and now he was looking for his whistle in Andy's garden. When he told them about his missing present, Looby guessed what had happened. She remembered that Tiffo had told her about the long, thin bone he'd buried in a secret place. Perhaps Andy's garden was the secret place. Andy soon found something very strange. It was Teddy's whistle. Teddy wanted to play it right away, but Looby said as the whistle had been buried in the ground, they should clean it first. As soon as his new whistle was cleaned, Teddy started to play it. Andy and Looby could soon tell that Teddy hadn't yet learned how to play his new whistle. Andy suggested that perhaps Teddy could let someone else have a turn at playing it. Teddy knew Looby loved music, so he let her try his whistle first. And Looby played the whistle beautifully.
He can be Teddy too.
One morning, Looby Loo had asked Teddy whether he'd like to help her make some shortbread biscuits. He was a bit late. He hoped she hadn't started without him. But she hadn't. She'd put everything they needed on the table: flour, cocoa powder, caster sugar, butter and milk. Teddy wanted to know what they were going to do first, so Looby Loo showed him. Looby Loo asked him to sift some flour and cocoa powder into the mixing bowl. Steady, Teddy. But Teddy had been sifting so eagerly some flour had gone up his nose. Looby Loo thought that perhaps they'd better start again. This time, Teddy was much more careful. Then Looby Loo added the sugar. The next thing they needed was butter, softened butter, so that it was easy to rub into the flour, cocoa and sugar. She asked Teddy if he'd like to do this. Steady, Teddy. Soon the mixture looked a bit like breadcrumbs. The last ingredient was a tablespoonful of milk, just enough to bind the mixture together. Looby Loo thought she should do this. She mixed the shortbread mixture with her hands until she'd made a nice round ball. No, not that sort of ball, Teddy. Looby Loo cut the dough into pieces and then flattened them into biscuit shapes. Teddy helped. The biscuits were ready to go into the oven. Teddy had found 2 wooden spoons. They made a fine noise. So did everything else in Looby Loo's house. But Looby Loo wasn't so keen on Teddy's drumming. She asked Teddy to go and play somewhere else until the biscuits were ready. Teddy wondered what he could use to drum on. Then he thought of just the place. Teddy's drumming was louder than ever. Missy Hissy was very startled. Whatever could be happening? Oh, stop, Teddy! Teddy had been making such a noise that the others soon arrived to find out what was going on. Missy Hissy told them that she'd been having a peaceful snooze when she was wakened by the loudest banging she'd ever heard. Andy Pandy told Teddy that he'd show him something else to do with wooden spoons, something a little bit quieter. When they got back to Andy Pandy's house, Andy Pandy went to his special cupboard and found a box of paints and 2 brushes, some glue, some string and 2 squares of colourful cloth. Andy Pandy asked Teddy for one of the wooden spoons. Andy Pandy began to paint a face on the wooden spoon. 2 big blue eyes and a big smiley mouth. Teddy did too. Next, Andy Pandy showed Teddy how to put glue around the handle of the wooden spoon, just below the face. Teddy liked gluing. Last of all, they tied the cloth to the gluey bits on the handles. They'd made 2 wooden spoon puppets. Hello, Teddy. Hello, Andy Pandy. The puppets were very good dancers and singers. Pum pa pum pa pum 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 pa pum pa pum pum pum. Andy Pandy said the puppets had done very well indeed. Teddy said that they should go and show Looby Loo. Even though they were her wooden spoons, Looby Loo thought the puppets were just great. Andy Pandy and Teddy said the shortbread biscuits were delicious. And the puppets thought so too.
Andy Pandy. Here comes Andy Pandy and Looby Loo. Happy as he can be, Teddy too.
Andy Pandy, Looby Loo and Teddy were enjoying lunch in the fresh air. But then they heard a strange buzzing sound. It got nearer and nearer until it arrived at the picnic table. It was a wasp. It must have seen the food. But did the wasp want the food, or did it just want to be a nuisance? Teddy thought the wasp wanted to chase him, so he tried to chase the wasp away. The wasp was causing so much trouble and noise that Tiffo came to see what was going on. Looby pointed out the wasp, and Tiffo promised that he'd chase it away. At last, the wasp was flying off. Missy Hissy had heard the noise on the green and wanted to see what it was all about. But now the wasp was flying towards Missy Hissy. She didn't like wasps at all. Tiffo was lying in wait for the wasp. But the wasp stung Tiffo. Poor Tiffo's front paw was hurting. He could hardly walk. Now the wasp had gone. Andy, Teddy and Looby were enjoying their lunch again. They all felt very sorry that Tiffo's foot hurt, and Andy and Teddy tried to help him walk. But that didn't work. What could they do? Tiffo had to go for walks. After all, that's what dogs like to do. They like to go for walks. Bilbo had an idea. He said they should make a car for Tiffo and push him around in it. He had some wheels they could use. Andy had some wood they could fix the wheels onto. And Looby had a box that Tiffo could sit in. So off they went to make his car. Looby Loo had some special medicine to put on Tiffo's wasp sting. That would soon make it feel better. Andy was very pleased. He was sure the car would work well. So Teddy went to fetch the last wheel from Bilbo. When Looby Loo had put her special medicine onto Tiffo's sting, she showed him the box that would be part of his car. Then she went to get some scissors to cut down one side of the box so that Tiffo would be able to climb inside. Teddy was finding it hard to carry a wheel all on his own, so he thought he'd roll it to Andy's house instead. But the wheel wouldn't go where Teddy wanted it to go. Every time Teddy tried to catch the wheel, it rolled away. Andy thought Teddy had been very clever to roll the wheel from Bilbo's house. Teddy thought he'd been clever too. Looby told them that the box was ready to be put on top of the wheels. So they went to fetch the box. Andy and Teddy soon finished making his car. Bilbo thought they'd done a fine job, and so did everyone. Tiffo couldn't wait to have his first ride. And his car really did work very well. He liked it even better than going for a walk. Tiffo liked riding in his car so much that he wouldn't let Andy and Teddy stop. It was nearly supper time, and still Tiffo wanted to ride in his car. But Andy and Teddy couldn't push or pull any more. This made Tiffo cross. But he made Teddy even crosser. Tiffo was running home. The wasp sting wasn't hurting anymore. Andy and Teddy had spent all afternoon pushing Tiffo around, even though Looby's medicine had made his paw better long before. Still, Looby knew how hard they'd worked and brought them a splendid supper. And this time there were no wasps to get in their way.
As he can be, Teddy too.
One morning, Teddy, Tiffo and Orby were playing in the garden. Their game took Teddy, Tiffo and Orby as far as Bilbo's boathouse. Then Tiffo noticed something odd. The boathouse seemed to have smoke coming out of it. Maybe Bilbo was in trouble. They'd better see what was going on. But it wasn't smoke. It was dust. It got up their noses and made them sneeze quite a lot. Bilbo wondered what all the noise was, and Teddy wondered why there was so much dust coming out of Bilbo's boathouse. Bilbo told them how an aunt of his had given him an old and very dusty piano. He'd been cleaning it up. That's what had made all the dust. Now he was going to play the piano. Teddy, Tiffo and Orby were very excited. As Bilbo played, Teddy, Tiffo and Orby danced. Then the piano made a funny noise. Not a piano sort of noise at all. Bilbo thought it sounded strange too. Teddy wondered whether there might be something inside the piano. Teddy was right. There had been something in the piano. It was a cardboard box. But what was in it? Maybe it was treasure. Bilbo opened the box and took out a metal bolt. The box was full of rather boring bolts. A piano was a funny place to leave a box of bolts, but that was just like his auntie, said Bilbo. She was sometimes a bit forgetful. He asked Teddy to get rid of the bolts for him. He didn't need them, and he wanted to play his piano again. Teddy took the bolts to Andy Pandy's house. Andy Pandy was always pleased to see Teddy. He asked him what he'd got in the box. So Teddy showed him what was inside. He asked if Andy Pandy wanted the metal bolts. Andy Pandy said he didn't need any bolts at the moment, but he had an idea as to how he and Teddy could use them. Andy Pandy went to his special cupboard. In the cupboard, he found some string, a pair of scissors, his best paint box, and a strong cardboard tube. First of all, Andy Pandy took the scissors and cut some lengths of string. Then he asked Teddy to tie the string to the bolts. Andy Pandy did too. Poor Teddy found he'd tied the first bolt to his paw. Steady, Teddy. Andy Pandy helped Teddy to get the string off his paw. When they'd tied the string to all the bolts, Andy Pandy asked Teddy to paint the cardboard tube. Teddy liked painting. It looked very colourful indeed. When the paint on the tube was dry, Andy Pandy and Teddy tied the bolts to it. Teddy wondered exactly what it was they were making. Wait and see, Teddy. There was one piece of string left. Andy Pandy tied it to the middle of the cardboard tube. Then Andy Pandy asked Teddy to blow at the bolts. So he did. Come on, Teddy, you can blow harder than that. Teddy blew harder. This time the bolts moved and banged against one another. They made a lovely sound. Teddy was thrilled. They'd made some wind chimes. Andy Pandy said they should hang them from the tree in the garden. Then everyone could hear them when the wind blew. The others came to see what was making such a nice noise. All except Bilbo. He was still playing his piano, and he was getting better at it too. His piano and the wind chimes filled the garden with music. Looby Loo liked the music so much, she started to dance, and they all joined in. One sunny afternoon, Andy Pandy was telling Teddy it was a perfect day for a picnic when Looby Loo came to show them a postcard. It had come from her cousin, who was on holiday at the seaside. Looby's cousin was having a wonderful time on the beach, and Andy thought a beach looked the perfect place for a picnic. Bilbo was busy tidying his house, and he'd put outside some of his oldest treasures. Orby had never seen anything like these treasures before, and he asked Bilbo what they were. Bilbo told him that this was an old sea chest that he'd brought home from his travels. Orby wanted to know what was inside the old sea chest, but Bilbo couldn't remember, and he couldn't open the heavy lid to look inside. Orby promised to bring some friends to help Bilbo to open his old sea chest. Looby's cousin had told her of the fun she'd had on the beach, with buckets and spades and hampers and picnics. Andy had a bucket and spade in his special cupboard. At home, Looby had a hamper and everything they'd need for a picnic. The only thing they didn't have was a beach. But they forgot all about that when Orby asked them to help Bilbo open his old sea chest. Andy had brought his spade, as he thought it might help lift the lid. Everyone wanted to see what was inside the chest. It was full of golden sand. Bilbo had brought the sand home to remind him of the many happy times he'd spent on golden beaches. Andy wondered if they could use the sand to make their own beach, and Bilbo said that they could lay out his old tarpaulin and spread the sand on that. Once Bilbo's tarpaulin had been laid out, the green soon started to look like a golden beach. Looby brought everything she could think of to make their beach look like the beach on her cousin's postcard. As soon as it was ready, Andy and his friends tried out their brand new beach. Andy wondered what they should do next. Looby's cousin had told her how she'd built sandcastles with her bucket and spade. So that's what they did next. Everyone was delighted with their sandcastle, and Looby had even brought some flags to go on top. Now it was time for their picnic. It was a fine picnic, and everyone agreed it was so much finer for being on their very own beach. Missy Hissy had seen the beach from the top of her house and wanted to join in. Looby's cousin and her friends had buried their legs in the sand, and Missy Hissy said she'd love to be buried, but just a bit. Tiffo saw Andy and Teddy digging and thought their brand new beach would be just the place to bury his brand new bone. Tiffo sent sand flying over everyone and over their picnic, so it was agreed that there should be no more burying. Looby's cousin had told her how lovely it was to sleep on a beach, and even though it was getting dark, Andy, Looby and Teddy didn't want to leave their beach just yet, so they decided to sleep there. But during the night it got colder and the wind began to blow. Everyone thought it was time to clear up and go home before the beach blew away. Bilbo's sea chest was filled with golden sand once again, and Andy, Looby and Teddy were tucked up in their own beds. They'd never forget the day they'd spent on their very own beach, but they were glad to be home. Andy Pandy was a little puzzled one afternoon. He hadn't seen Teddy all day. He wondered where he was. He went to ask Looby Loo if she'd seen Teddy, but she hadn't. Tiffo hadn't seen him either, nor had Missy Hissy, Orby, or Bilbo. Perhaps Teddy had been at home all the time. Teddy had been having a very lazy day. He'd been sitting in his chair, eating crisps and drinking fizzy drinks. Andy asked Teddy if he wanted to come out and play. Teddy said he didn't really feel like it, but Andy could have a crisp if he wanted. Andy Pandy didn't think Teddy was getting enough exercise. Teddy thought he was getting plenty. Andy Pandy asked Teddy to come on a little run with him in the morning. He'd show him what real exercise was. So Teddy agreed. The next morning, Andy Pandy was up bright and early. When Andy Pandy got to Teddy's house, Teddy looked very sleepy indeed. Andy Pandy told him it was time for their exercise. Teddy hadn't had his breakfast yet, but Andy Pandy told him they could have breakfast later, after their exercise, and if Teddy put a bit of effort into it, Andy Pandy would treat him to a really big breakfast. Teddy did a few exercises, but Andy said he hadn't done enough yet to earn his breakfast. They were going to go for a run. Tiffo thought his visitors had come to play, but Andy Pandy explained that they were on a run. At last they reached the end of their run. Teddy was quite tired. He was very hungry too. Andy said that while he cooked them a really tasty breakfast, Teddy could help himself to some cereal. Teddy, Teddy! Teddy said he was sorry and went to get a brush and dustpan to sweep up the mess. It seemed a pity to waste so much cereal. But it didn't need to go to waste. Teddy said it wasn't a good idea to eat food that had fallen on the floor. But they weren't going to eat it. Andy Pandy went to his special cupboard and found a piece of cardboard, a sheet of red paper, some glue, and a paintbrush. Andy Pandy asked Teddy to glue the paper to the cardboard. Teddy liked gluing. While they were waiting for the glue to dry, they could have their breakfast, said Andy Pandy. Teddy, Teddy. After they'd finished their breakfast, Teddy went to see if the glue had dried. It had. Now for the next bit. Andy Pandy asked Teddy to paint a picture on the paper with glue. So he did, but he couldn't see what he'd painted. It was almost as if there was nothing on the paper at all. Andy told Teddy that this was where the cereal came in. He asked him to sprinkle it over the paper. Then he asked him to shake it gently off again. Some of the cereal stuck to the glue, and at last Teddy could see what he had painted. And very good it was, too.
Sandy Pandy and Looby Loo, happy as he can be, Teddy too, playing in the garden every day, making things is so much fun. Here comes Andy Pandy in Andy Pandy Land.
Looby Loo was so pleased with the biscuits she just baked, she invited Andy Pandy to taste them. Andy was going to ask Looby for another biscuit when they heard a bird singing outside. It was singing so beautifully they wanted to see the bird. But when they looked outside, it had flown away. Looby had an idea. She thought that if they put some of her biscuits outside, the bird might fly down to eat them, and they'd be able to see it. They went home to wait for the bird to find the biscuits. But Teddy had come out for a walk, and he found the biscuits. He was sure nobody would mind if he tried one, and he was sure nobody would mind if he tried the other one. Andy and Looby waited all morning and all afternoon, but the bird who'd sung so beautifully didn't come back. Teddy wondered where Andy and Looby had been all day. Now he'd found them. He told them all about the tasty biscuits he'd found on the picnic table. At last, Andy and Looby knew why the bird hadn't flown down to eat the biscuits. Teddy wanted to know why Andy and Looby were looking so sad, so Andy told him about the bird and the biscuits they'd left out for it. Teddy was sorry he'd eaten the biscuits, but they had been very tasty. Andy told Bilbo all about the bird and its beautiful song, and Bilbo said that if they got up as early in the morning as he did, they'd hear the beautiful singing of the dawn chorus when all the birds wake up and sing to each other. They all agreed they'd get up at dawn the very next day. The next morning, Looby Loo was still asleep when the sun came up, and Andy Pandy was still asleep, and Teddy was still asleep as well. Bilbo had been waiting for a very long time. But when Andy, Looby and Teddy finally arrived, Bilbo had to tell them that they'd slept so late that they'd missed the dawn chorus. He said that if they wanted to hear the dawn chorus next day, they should try an old trick he'd learned at sea. Before they went to bed, they must each tie one end of a very long string to one of their feet and hang the other end over the playground gate. Then at dawn, Bilbo would tug the strings to wake them all. Tiffo often liked to go for a stroll as soon as it was dark. And when he saw the strings, he thought they must be a toy, so he started to play with them. Now Andy, Looby and Teddy were all awake. Tiffo had finished his game and gone home, so there was no one there to tell them it was still early in the night, and it would be many, many hours until dawn. They wondered where Bilbo was and settled down to wait for him. But they were all very tired, and it wasn't long before they were fast asleep. Many, many hours later, Bilbo came out to wake Andy, Looby and Teddy. He was surprised to see they were up already, and he was even more surprised to see they were all fast asleep. No matter how hard he tried, Bilbo just could not wake them to hear the bird's dawn chorus. So he blew his ship's whistle. They all woke up. The whistle was very loud. But none of them could hear the dawn chorus. The ship's whistle had driven all the birds away. Everyone was very sorry to have missed the dawn chorus once again, but Looby invited them home for an early breakfast. They were tucking into Looby's breakfast when they heard a beautiful sound. It was the song of the bird Andy and Looby had heard the other day. This time, Andy could see the bird. It was only a small brown bird, but that didn't matter because it sang such a beautiful song.
Andy Pandy and Looby Loo, happy as he can be, Teddy too, playing in the garden every
parcel had arrived one morning. It was for Teddy, and Andy Pandy was taking it to him. Missy Hissy wondered what was inside. Andy Pandy told her that they'd have to wait for Teddy to open it. Whoops! Teddy hadn't seen the box. But when he did, his fall was soon forgotten. He wondered what it was. Andy Pandy said he didn't know either, and they wouldn't find out until Teddy opened it. Teddy was very excited. A parcel for him? Steady, Teddy. Inside the box was a pair of skates. They were a present from Teddy's rich uncle in America. Teddy was thrilled. He couldn't wait to get them on. Missy Hissy asked if she could have the string. It would come in very useful in her pipes. Missy Hissy was very pleased with her string. Teddy was ready to try out the skates, but they weren't easy to stand on. They were even harder to roll on. But Teddy soon got the idea. Well done, Teddy. Teddy thought he was ready to skate a bit further now. 1, 2, 3, go! Loo was in her garden weeding the flower beds. Some of them didn't want to be pulled up at all. She was so busy she didn't hear Teddy coming. Look out, Teddy! When Andy Pandy got to Loo's house, she told him that a strange something had just whizzed past her. That was Teddy, Andy Pandy told her. Teddy explained how his skates had run away with him and how there had nearly been a nasty accident. Loo asked if she could have a go on Teddy's skates. Teddy said he wanted to practice a bit more first. Loo was a bit disappointed. She'd have liked a go at skating. Never mind, said Andy Pandy. He got something that was almost as good as a pair of skates. Andy found a scooter and a trike. When Loo saw what Andy Pandy had found, she was thrilled. Andy Pandy asked her if she'd like to have a go on the scooter. She couldn't wait. Then Teddy whizzed up and joined them. There was nearly another accident. When Teddy saw the scooter and the trike, he had an idea. Why didn't they have a race round the garden? Andy Pandy and Loo said that sounded like fun. Soon they were ready. Everyone had come to watch the race, and Bilbo was going to start them off. Ready, steady, go! They raced as fast as they could, but Teddy was the fastest. They raced on and on. When they got to Orby's house, Teddy was quite a long way in the lead, but he wasn't looking where he was going. Steady, Teddy. Teddy was soon back in the race. By the time Teddy got to Missy Hissy's pipes, he was well in the lead. The finishing line wasn't far away. He was bound to win, he thought. But Teddy hadn't noticed the string that Missy Hissy had asked for earlier. Teddy was standing on it, and it was tangled round the wheels of his skate. Bye-bye, Teddy. The finishing line was in sight, and everyone was cheering. Andy Pandy made sure that they tied for first place. Teddy came last. He wasn't very pleased, until Loo asked everyone to come to tea. That cheered him up.
Andy Pandy. Here comes Andy Pandy and Loo, happy as he can be. Teddy too, playing in the garden every day, making things is so much fun. Here comes Andy Pandy in Andy Pandy land.
Andy Pandy had found something strange in his special cupboard. It was a huge onion. But Andy didn't know that. He'd never seen anything like it before and wondered what it could be. It smelled rather odd, but Andy found that he could pull off the brown skin and look inside. Was it something he could eat? The more Andy cut into the strange object, the more he was sniffing. And now he was crying, even though he was perfectly happy. Teddy had come to visit Andy, and he was very sad to see him crying. He asked what was wrong, but Andy was crying so much he couldn't answer. Teddy went to fetch help. Looby Loo was busy making soup when Teddy came to call. He told her Andy Pandy was crying, and Looby told Teddy to cheer Andy up by making him laugh. She lent him her feather duster so that he could tickle Andy. Andy was still crying, though he didn't know why, and he was still trying to find out what was inside the huge onion. Teddy tickled Andy as hard as he could, but Andy didn't seem to notice. However much Teddy tickled Andy, he kept on sniffing and crying. While Teddy went off to think of another way to make him laugh, Andy went to ask Looby Loo if she knew what the strange object was that he'd found in his cupboard. Looby had never seen such a thing before. Andy asked her to try to find what was inside. Now Looby Loo was crying. Andy wanted to cheer her up, but as soon as he got near the onion, he started crying again. When Teddy came to see if Andy was visiting Looby, he saw them both crying. So he'd have to make them both laugh. But nothing would stop Andy and Looby crying. While Teddy went away to think of another trick that might cheer them up, Andy and Looby decided to take the onion out to the green and ask their friends if they knew what it was and why they couldn't stop crying. Tiffo was having a walk when he heard the sound of sniffing. When he saw Andy and Looby sniffing and crying, he ran off to tell their friends. Missy Hissy had already heard the sniffing and crying, and so had Orby. They all wanted to cheer Andy and Looby up, but how? Teddy asked them to help him, and everyone set off to try and make Andy and Looby laugh. Teddy was sure his new trick would make Andy and Looby laugh. He watched Teddy sit down in a bucket of water, but still they didn't laugh. Tiffo thought his tricks would cheer up Andy and Looby, but they didn't. Now it was Orby's turn. Surely that would make Andy and Looby laugh. But it didn't. Now everyone wanted to know about the strange onion. When Andy said it might be something to eat, Teddy asked to try it for himself. Now everyone was crying. Bilbo had heard all this sniffing and crying and asked what was wrong, but nobody could tell him. Bilbo had seen the onion. Now he knew why everyone was in tears. He told them that it was the smell that came from the onion when they cut into it that was making them cry. As soon as they finished cutting the onion and started cooking it, everyone would stop crying. Looby said she'd take the onion home right away and put it into her pot and make onion soup. Bilbo was right. As soon as Looby put the slices of onion into her soup, there were no more tears. Andy Pandy thought Looby's soup was delicious, and Teddy thought he'd like a little more pepper, but he poured so much pepper it made him sneeze. At last Andy and Looby were laughing, and so was Teddy.